there we go. All right, so first, thank you for taking your time tonight to be here. One of the reasons I've done synchronous classes in the past, if I can speak, is just so I can see you. One of the things that is a struggle in teaching an online course is I never actually get to meet many of you. So all I have is a name and some grades and some documents I have to grade, right? So getting to see you and interact with you in person, I think helps me better understand where you all are and can help me actually modify the class as we go if necessary. The other thing too that I'll go ahead and say is after we get done with tonight, as you're working through your actual marketing plan, your final project for the class, if you need or have need of me, I can make myself available to you. So if you want, if your group meets and you need my help, then it is perfectly okay to reach out to me and I can work to make myself available so I can meet with you. So that flexibility I know is difficult for some, but for me, I really do try to do that for you all. And the other part of that I would say is that by making myself available, it also gives you some time to, if you need help, I can help you. So with that, I'm going to walk through what the marketing plan is. Some of that you may have already read, and then what your project is. And then I'm also going to give you some insight on where we are in real life when it comes to marketing and marketing planning. So with that, first, this is one of my favorite quotes in marketing, and I use it every time we start teaching the marketing plan. But marketing takes a day to learn. Unfortunately, it takes a lifetime to master. So marketing is both art and science. And for that reason, it makes it very difficult to really be good at marketing. I would say the people that are all really good at it are naturally really good at it, or they've worked at it for a long time. It's a lot to kind of take all of these topics that we talk about in marketing and take ownership of them and understand them well enough to be able to execute on them. And so it's sort of like, in my opinion, marketing is basically taking all the business disciplines and packing them into one thing, and then you have to communicate it. So that makes it a challenge because you have to communicate with every department and whatever organization you're in to do a good job in marketing. So when we talk about a marketing plan, well, marketing plan is really just a document, and it identifies a goal and outlines how we're going to get to the goal. So in a lot of ways, it's a very strategic function of a business, because if you're building a marketing plan, you've decided that you're going to grow 10%, or you're going to launch a new product, or you're going to do, whatever it is you're going to do as an organization. If you're a nonprofit, you're going to fundraise for whatever it is that you need to fundraise for. And then how do you do that is really what marketing does. And then how do you measure it once you start trying to do it? And that's what a marketing plan is. It's kind of outlining all those steps. And the book does a really good job of kind of walking you through what those steps are. The marketing plan handbook kind of walks you through what those steps are. But generally speaking, what you have to do is you have to set a goal. And that could be all sorts of stuff, right? It could be, we want to grow brand awareness by 10%. We want to increase sales by $2 million a year. We want to increase e-commerce, our average order value by $10. We want, it could be all sorts of things. And then we have to define how we're going to do that. And so much of what we talked about in those first two class lectures that I give, really a lot of that's the strategy pieces. Okay, so what's our business model, or what are the tactics? What are the things that we what are our products? What are our services? How much do we charge for them? All those things are bits and pieces of the strategy, as is understanding who we are, as is understanding who our competition is, as is understanding the context, right? Going back to the 5 C's and the customers and collaborators and all of context and climate and all of those things, making sure we understand those so that way we can figure out what tactics to use and then implement it. How we actually do the thing we said we're going to do. So we understand who our customers are, we understand who we are, we understand our context, We understand what tactics we want to use. So how do we actually do it? And that's implementation. And then control is how we measure it. So that's really kind of the nuts and bolts of a marketing plan. And the marketing plan handbook has some examples of that. Some of them are like bulleted lists. Some of them can also be written narratives. I think when you put your marketing plan together, I think you have to figure out what works best for your group, but you also have to figure out not only what works best for your group, but think about your organization. Sometimes it's better to have it written. Sometimes it's better to have it in sort of a punch list sort of style, as some of those do in the marketing plan handbook. So I would just encourage you to think through that what works best for you. I personally, and this is not saying that if you don't do this, you don't get a good grade. I don't want you to hear that. I like the narrative style because then I can see your thought process a little better. But I also understand the necessity and speed the punch list version of a marketing plan gives you. So if you decide to write it in that way, that's okay. So either way, no criticism. So, but you do have some options there in how you produce that and get it back to me. All I care about is how professional it is. So, and I'll get into some of the details about, when we talk about professionalism, but we can also talk about the things that go wrong in marketing plans. I've got a whole slide on that too. All right, so what does it look like when you turn it in? So one, you're going to have an executive summary. And that executive summary is going to be like a one-page, here's what we're going to do, or here's our goal, here's what we're going to do to reach the goal, and here's how we're going to implement it, and here's how we're going to measure it in one page. And that's so if the CEO is reading this thing and they are not going to read the whole plan, and they need to be able to tell the shareholders what it is they're going to do, boom, got it. That's the executive summary. When you actually write it and produce it, you need to walk through all the process. So first is the situation analysis. That is the climate or context. That is an understanding of the business, so the company is, who its collaborators may be, who its customers may be. So really, that's the 5 C's. So the situation analysis really is the 5 C's. From there, then you say, okay, that's who we are. Here's our goal. And here's why we have this goal. And then we've got some ideas on how we're going to get there. Okay, here's our strategy. And here are the tactics we're going to use to get, to implement the strategy and meet the goal. And then there's implementation. Here's how that's going to work. Here's a timeline. Here's how much it's going to cost. And then here's the controls. Here's how we're going to measure it to see if we were successful or not, and make sure that we get some sort of return for whatever it is that we're going to do. And then the exhibits are basically just other files, right? So those can be charts and graphs and whatever else that you need to support the rest of your marketing plan. So that is the structure of a marketing plan. And that's outlined again in the book and in the marketing plan handbook. When you think about it from a structural standpoint, and this graphic is in the text as well, but you have focus and benchmarks. So really just, here are the things that the goals and benchmarks that we can measure along the way. You've got the strategy is the target market, the value prop. So the thing that you're actually going to give that target market, how you're creating value across the board. So it's back to that value creation stuff we've talked about already. And then the tactics, and we go through those in detail through the rest of this class. So the rest of the course really is built around the next 3 items: the tactics, the implementation, and the control. All right, so we'll get into the specifics of each of those as you go through the rest of the modules. And so that's really the way the marketing plan itself is outlined. So what if what you do is broken, or how are things typically broken in a marketing plan? Well, when you build a plan, and this is where the grading for me gets a little interesting, because I can grade for grammar and I can grade for, whether or not you put it in the right structure. But this is where people get hung up, because let's say that you decide that whatever company that you're working for wants to target students under between the ages of 16 to 18. Okay. So whatever it is, you're going to target people 16 to 18. And then you tell me that, I really think direct mail and Facebook are the way to go. And I'm going to say, no, that is not true because they are not there. I think we should communicate, or if you tell me that I really want to target individuals that whose household income is $40,000 a year, and I want to sell them a $75,000 Cybertruck. No, because they can't afford your offering. So you really have to make sure that don't make logic flaws, because there are some things that just when you think of, if you just step back and say, does this really make sense? Sometimes it doesn't. So you would be shocked at some of the plans that I've received, or maybe not, where the logic is just not there. Like there's some significant logic flaws. Um, the other thing is using inaccurate information. So don't make an assumption on something that you don't have factual data around. So you have to be really careful not to do that. Implementation errors. So where you want to run ads in a magazine, and let's say that it's Southern Living or Good Housekeeping or whatever it may be, and you're going to run an ad in that magazine, and your budget's $500. An ad in that magazine is more like $25,000. That's an implementation error. And then changes in the marketplace, right? So things that are happening right now that you're all familiar with, things like AI, things like tariffs, things like economic pressure, the labor market. Those things are real life things that are happening right now that can be a struggle. And so I would just encourage you to pay attention, right? So pay attention to what's happening around the business that you're going to build a marketing plan for, to make sure you don't make just some erroneous flaw because you didn't think about what's actually happening or what's being planned. If you come to me and said, "Hey, we want to sell, we really want to do work with data centers," that's brilliant because data centers are a hot topic and a lot of growth right now. What's the challenge with data centers? You need to research that. The answer is power. Like, how are we going to power all of these data centers that are being built? Because I believe the statistic that I heard today was that a date like of all the data centers, a single data center can use the same amount of power in 5 years that 30 million homes use. That's insane. And so that, though, if you have not done the research around your context, right, you haven't done the situational analysis, you wouldn't know that. So you need to really pay attention to those sort of details, whatever organization you choose. Now, what business you choose, I don't care. Like, you can choose any organization you want. It can be who you work for now. It can be someone on your team that really wants to do a marketing plan for their business. It can be Coca-Cola. It can be a small business. Just make sure whoever you pick, you can get information about it. You don't want to pick a business that you're not going to be able to get information from or for, because that's a huge challenge. All right, so the question that you all probably want to know is who is on your team. I will publish this after this class period, after the synchronous activity in D2L, so you'll have it. But this is your group, and so you'll be able to access this here in the next 30 to 45 minutes. So what I would encourage you to do is get with your team, because your team will do two things together. So your team is going to build your marketing plan together, and you're going to do your case study together. Okay, so the case study is due, of course, before the marketing plan. But the reason you do the case study together is because it gives you an opportunity to work together. And so the case study is for write-on. You're just going to answer the questions that are in the case. And you'll do that as a group, submit that as a group. So one person from the group will need to submit that case study. And then when you finish your marketing plan, one person from your group will need to submit your marketing plan. And so we'll talk about what those two artifacts are for a marketing plan here in just a second. But that's the two activities you will do with a group. You will do your case study together, and you will do your marketing plan together. Okay. Any questions about that? No. Perfect. All right. So again, I'll publish these in D2L, so you'll have access to who's on your team here in just a few minutes. All right. So what is your actual project? Well, you're going to develop a marketing plan for an organization. The two artifacts that I need from you are a written plan and a presentation via video. Now, if you all get on a Zoom and record it, that's fine. If you all get on Canva and record it, that's fine. If you all get in a room together and record it, that's fine. But I need your presentation presented in Google Slides or PowerPoint or Canva or whatever it is you want to present in, presented via some sort of video. And then I will need a copy of your written plan. Again, one person from your team should submit that. Don't hear that as everybody in your group needs to submit it. One person from your group should submit both of those documents. Okay? All right. So, I would be remiss. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, can I just ask a question about the expectation on the video presentation?
Yeah.
Do you want faces on screen or is audio overlay sufficient?
Audio, yeah, so voice over PowerPoint is perfectly fine.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, so if you want to do it that way, that's okay as well. Sometimes that's easier if you're having a hard time getting your group together, right? So, yeah. Yeah, that's fine. So, so if you haven't done that, you can add audio files to a PowerPoint presentation, and so you can do that as well as an option. Great question. All right, so the way that traditional marketing planning works, and so I'm just sharing this as information. This is not do it this way. This is just so you know how the real world kind of works. Traditional planning and the way that we have to teach marketing is based on waterfall methodology. So if you're familiar with, if you're a project, there's someone in the class I know that's a project manager. If you're familiar with how waterfall works, the Gantt chart structure, basically it's you do this, then you do this, then you do this, then you do this, right? So there's like a step-by-step process. In traditional marketing planning, we build a goal, and then we build a strategy, and then we build out the tactics, and then we have implementation, and then we measure it, and then we do it again, and then we do it again. Like that's just how we've traditionally done marketing. I'd say that because that is the easiest way for us to teach marketing. Okay, so in a marketing classroom, an undergraduate or graduate, the easiest way to teach marketing is this is how it's done. And the reason for that is because it's easy to build frameworks around. Like this entire course is built around frameworks. And those frameworks do work. Like I'm not going to deny that they function. But the problem is the speed at which they function. And so if you think about the process that you are going to be going through over the next 7 weeks, then it is, okay, what's the goal? What are our strategies? What are our tactics? So it's going to take you 7 weeks to build a marketing plan that should be ran for 6 months to a year, right? How often for any organization do you get to the end of a period of a year and the marketing plan that you built or the plan that you built for your business is still completely intact a year later? Never. And so the problem with traditional marketing planning is that, frankly, it changes on the daily. So you build a big campaign, you build a big structure like this, and you have to see it through to the end, or you change it in the middle of it, and all the things that you built along the way become very difficult. And so that's really the challenge of this traditional marketing planning. And I'll tell you, at our agency, we do this for clients. We build from the top down with a very clear understanding that we presented this today, tomorrow everything can change. And so that's sort of the way we go about it. But I'll tell you that there are other ways, but they require bigger teams, they require flexible budgets, and they require a whole lot of trust with your leadership team. And so those sort of things are more iterative. And so if you are in project management, you're probably familiar with Agile. Um, or if you've had any exposure to project management. So Agile is one way to build a marketing plan. And you build basically the marketing plan that I'm asking you to build is over 6 months to a year. In Agile, the marketing plan is for 1 to 4 weeks. And so this is really kind of how it works in that we build, we test, and we learn, right? So that's really the adaptive or iterative structure of modern marketing is a little faster than what we teach. And I think that's just because it's real hard for me to explain how products and services and like all the tactics work and make you do that in 4 week increments. That's just crazy in an 8 week class. So it's a whole lot easier for me to teach, this is the way it works. And I think traditionally that's why we also teach this in undergrad and all marketing is this is how it works. Because all these things still happen. They just happen a lot faster in real life. So, and the reason why is Agile is customer driven. Like we're actually looking at things like brand personas and understanding here's who our customer is, which you can kind of do that in the marketing plan. That's part of the situation analysis. But build these stories. And when we say user stories, it's like the actual reasons they buy a product to the actual reasons they use a service and be more specific. And then we can change as their needs change and we can be faster and more iterative. So if you think about the way the other assignment that you have, the other big assignment outside of exams is this AI project. And so this is brand new this semester. I've never done this before. So I hope I do not crash and burn. So let's hope that doesn't happen. But what I'm asking you to do as individuals, outside of exams and discussions, the only real individual project you have is this AI project. And really, what it's meant for you to do is to build these brand personas. And so, as we get to that part of the course, you'll learn a lot more about personas and how that works for the consumer and all those things. But really, what you're going to do is you're going to go to two of your choice of the prominent AI platforms, whether it's Google Gemini and ChatGPT or ChatGPT and Grok or whatever it may be. And you're going to say, hey, ChatGPT, I'm this business and my consumer is this. And you're going to give it some explicit instructions about your consumer, the way you understand them. Build a buyer persona for me or a consumer persona. And it's going to give you a response. And then you can also ask it to say, hey, show me what they would look like. And it would do that too. Here's the thing. The responses that you get from each of these platforms will be different. And what's interesting, and here's the point, is that AI does have bias. And each of these platforms do have a bias. And so the question is, what is it? What is the bias between ChatGPT and Gemini or Grok and Claude? Like what is the difference? Like how is it that these platforms are trained and to understand the world or understand the response that it should give you based on the question that you asked? And so that's and really the assignment is one, learn how to create a buyer persona and using these new tools to do it. But then two, using that information to say, okay, I actually see the bias now. I understand how these platforms work a little differently. And that information is going to help me because now I know, well, I can probably use this platform over another one.
It's her dad. It's romance's mother.
So does that all make sense? Do you have any questions around that? Kara.
Oh, no, sorry.
Okay. No, I saw you
Yeah.
unmute. I just wanted to make sure.
No, you're good. But as a side note, I'll say something. I don't think he'll crash and burn. It'll be a fun assignment, I think.
Cool. Kevin.
Yeah, just to get sorry, just to confirm, you want us to go ahead and build a buyer persona, and then what you'd like us to do is the second part of this is to try to kind of analyze the bias and kind of identify that between the two different platforms.
Yep, that's it.
Okay, straightforward.
So, yeah.
So I have a question. How in depth do you want our initial prompt to be? Can we just kind of give it this is the company, develop a buyer persona and give me demographics and just kind of see where it goes? Or do you want us to lead with dense information?
I'm honestly intrigued to see what you all do with it. So I'm okay with a simple prompt because I ask in the assignment that you share your prompt with me, and then you can dig further if you think you should, right?
Okay.
So I'm really interested to see, because you may find some really, especially if you don't give it a lot of information, you might find a really strong bias. Where if you give it more detailed, like a more detailed prompt, you may get less bias, and it's following your bias instead. So, yeah, we will see what happens. I traditionally I've done 2 case studies, but I thought this was a neat way to introduce AI and how it's being used in marketing. And frankly, I actually did this for a client that I presented to today. So, built a target market based on a very specific set of instructions, though mine were very specific. So, but I think yours may be really interesting, and I really do hope that's the case because I think you'll learn a lot from it. Okay, so last thing, and as we talk about, I mentioned Agile before. If you look at the top line, this is more traditional, right? So you launch a big strategy. You've done goals, strategy, tactics, implementation, control. You've measured all that for a year, and you just finished a big launch. Now you got to do it again for the next year. So you're going to go do research, sometimes focus groups, whatever it may be, and then you're going to build your strategy. You're going to go goals, strategy, tactics, okay? And then you're actually going to implement it, campaign launch, control, analyze and measure, and then do it again and do it again. Like that is traditionally how we've done it. When we talk about Agile, that bottom line is more in line, where we say, okay, here's a little bit of strategy. And we're going to launch it and measure it. We're going to learn from it. We're going to adjust it. We're going to do it again. And then we're going to go through that process again. And so it's very iterative, where your hope is that you find that something works really, really well in your research. And that way, when you launch it big, it is incredibly profitable. So it is a much different, where big bang campaigns, right? This idea of the traditional marketing campaign versus these much smaller and targeted efforts. You know, that's the way really we're going about marketing today. And a lot of it has to do with, I would rather spend $500 and find out it didn't work than $50,000. And so, because we can learn, and here's what's crazy right now when it comes to AI and all the tools that we have moving forward into the future, I could see 3 to 4 years from now, we build campaign strategies, we submit them to AI. AI is going to tell us what our consumers would do with it, and we may change our campaigns, and it'll even tell us what to change. So it's going to be really interesting, for sure. A little scary. So with that, I'm going to open the floor for questions. How can I help you? Any questions about the projects, assignments, anything we got? Within reason.
I'm going to actually just kind of pick your brain a little bit if you could go back to that last slide.
Sure.
Because I work in technology and been doing it for years, and we do a lot of agile.
Yeah.
Software development's all agile. But there's also still a place for waterfall. And I'm kind of wondering if that's kind of the same thing with marketing, where yes, you do test a lot of these little strategies and you figure things out, but then you get to the point where you're like, we need to go do this big strategy launch. And the only way to get there is to go through this waterfall process because there's so much dollars tied to it and there's so much riding on it. Is that kind of how the same process works?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that it's the similar across different,
Yeah, and the challenge is, and that's why I've never actually taught Agile this way. I've actually never taught Agile to this class.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to at least present the idea because very much like a lot of times, especially when you're building brand voice or building brand structure or, who the company is, those things are big processes. But once those are set, then you can implement them in all sorts of little ways. So yeah, so there are a lot of, and especially brands that have done a ton of testing, they'll go through that process and then they'll take the one campaign that won and they will blow it out of the box from a, that whole marketing plan process. So
Gotcha.
yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Other questions? Okay. Oh. I think Ryan comes in right at the end. So
Yeah.
what? Yeah. Um, so Ryan, we just wrapped up the walkthrough. I recorded it though, so you'll be able to get back and check it out.
Perfect. Thank you. That's what I was hoping for.
Yeah. So with that, I'm going to stop recording.